Mom, can I be a princess? Ivanka's wide, curious eyes looked up at her mother, waiting for an answer. Ivana smiled, gently running her fingers through her daughter's golden hair before replying, "You are already a princess, my dear. But a true princess is not just about wearing a crown. She must have intelligence and a strong heart." Ivanka tilted her head, thinking, what is a strong heart? It means that no matter what happens, you don't give up. No matter what people say, you know who you are and what you want. But what if I don't know what I want? Ivana placed her hand on her daughter's forehead, closed her eyes for a moment, and sighed softly. That is why I pray for you every night, so that you can find your own path. Late at night, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the luxurious apartment. Ivanka ran up to her father as he walked in after a long day. Daddy, I drew a big castle today. Do you want to see it? Donald laughed heartily, ruffling his daughter's hair before glancing at the drawing on the table. A castle, huh? That's great. But remember, a castle only has value when you own it, not just when you draw it on paper. Ivanka frowned slightly, not fully understanding. Own it? What do you mean, Daddy? It means that if you want something, don't just dream about it. Find a way to make it real. She thought for a moment, then turned to her mother. Mom, what should I own? Ivana smiled, her voice soft yet firm. First, own yourself. The school hallway buzzed with students chatting. A group of girls stood nearby, their eyes glancing toward Ivanka. Did you see? Ivanka always wears expensive clothes, one girl whispered. Of course, she's Donald Trump's daughter, another replied. Ivanka stopped for a moment, then walked over. So what? The first girl smirked. It means you already have everything. You don't have to work hard like the rest of us. Ivanka clenched her fists. Who told you that? Everyone knows, the second girl shrugged. Ivanka looked at them for a long moment before saying, firmly and clearly, I will prove you wrong. That evening, Ivanka sat silently by the window, gazing out at the glowing city lights. Ivana walked in and sat beside her. What's wrong, my dear? People think I don't have to work for anything, that everything is just given to me. Ivana placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. And what will you do to prove them wrong? Ivanka looked up, determination shining in her eyes. I will work harder than everyone else. Ivana nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand. Then start now. The soft glow of the bedroom lamp cast a warm light over the room. Ivanka sat on her bed, staring at her mother as Ivana gently stroked her hair. Mom, why do you always pray for me? Ivana smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. Because I want you to find your own way, not just be your father's daughter, but be Ivanka, your own person. Ivanka was quiet for a moment before whispering, but I don't know who I am yet. I'm just Ivanka Trump. That's why you must search, my dear. No one can tell you who you are, except yourself. Ivanka nodded slowly, deep in thought. It was a cold winter morning. Ivanka wrapped herself in her school uniform, walking through the long corridors of Choate Rosemary Hall. Everything felt distant, lonely. A group of students sat by the window, laughing and chatting. But as soon as Ivanka walked by, the conversation stopped. She felt their gazes on her, heard the faint whispers. She always has the best things. She probably never has to try. Ivanka took a deep breath and walked past them, finding her usual seat at the back of the class. No matter where she was, she always felt like an outsider. That evening, she called home. Her mother's warm voice came through the phone. Mom, why am I not like everyone else? Ivana chuckled softly. Because you weren't born to be like anyone else. You were born to be you. But how could she find herself? Ivanka still didn't know the answer. That weekend, back in New York, Ivanka sat across from her mother at the dining table. The chandelier above them cast a soft golden glow on the wine glasses and silverware. Mom, if I want something, what should I do? Ivana put her fork down and looked directly into her daughter's eyes. If you want something, don't wait for anyone to give it to you. Go and take it. Ivanka tightened her grip on her glass, those words embedding themselves deep in her mind. One morning, Ivanka stood in front of the mirror. She held a perfectly tailored outfit in her hands, something fitting for elite social events. But she didn't want to just attend events and smile for the cameras. She wanted to do something different. A thought struck her. At 15, she decided to step into the world of fashion modeling. It was an unexpected choice, but it was hers. Inside the waiting room of elite model management, young women with flawless features sat in a row, waiting for their turn. Ivanka stood among them, not as the Trump heiress, but as a girl eager to prove herself. A casting director flipped through her portfolio, glancing up. Donald Trump's daughter? Ivanka met his gaze steadily. I'm Ivanka Trump. The whispers and curious looks around her didn't matter. She was here to earn her place. That night, she called her mother. Mom, I got my first modeling contract. Ivana chuckled. So what's your next step? Ivanka thought for a moment. I'll see if this is truly my path. She walked down the runway for top designers, appeared in high-fashion magazines, and felt the flash of cameras follow her everywhere. Yet something was still missing. Bright lights, glamorous outfits, exclusive parties. But was she really building something meaningful? One night, as she lay in bed, she heard her mother's words echoing in her mind. Find your own path. And this time, she knew it was time to take a different turn. The decision to leave modeling was not easy, but Ivanka felt an undeniable urge within her. She needed a stronger foundation, something beyond fleeting fame. Standing at the gates of Georgetown University, she took a deep breath and tightened the strap of her handbag. This was where she would begin again. For 2 years, she immersed herself in her studies, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. But something still felt incomplete. She wanted to push herself further. One evening, as she sat in her dorm room flipping through a business magazine, her eyes landed on a familiar name, Wharton School of Business, the same institution where her father had studied. Her fingers hovered over her phone before finally dialing. Mom, I'm transferring to Wharton. There was a pause on the other end before Ivana's voice came through, calm and knowing. So, you're finally embracing what's in your blood? Ivanka smiled slightly. No, I'm not following Dad. I want to find my own way to succeed. Ivana chuckled softly. That's my girl. The first day at Wharton, a professor posed a question to the class. What makes a successful entrepreneur? Various hands shot up, offering answers. Capital, networking, market insight. Ivanka listened carefully, then slowly raised her hand. Understanding yourself. The professor tilted his head. And why do you think that? Because if you don't truly know what you want, no amount of money or connections will help you. You'll always be chasing someone else's dream instead of your own. The room was silent for a moment. Then the professor nodded. A perspective worth considering. Ivanka knew then. She wasn't just learning about business. She was discovering herself. One chilly evening, she sat on a bench in the Wharton courtyard, phone pressed to her ear. Dad, I want to work at the Trump Organization. There was a brief silence. Then Donald's voice, measured and firm. Are you sure? This isn't a playground. I don't want it to be. Then prove it. Ivanka gripped the phone tighter. I will. Ivanka stepped into the Trump Organization's towering headquarters, not as the daughter of the CEO, but as a newcomer eager to earn her place. No private office, no special treatment, just her and a desk among dozens of other employees. She started from the ground up, reviewing financial reports, managing small-scale projects, even visiting construction sites. Some colleagues whispered behind her back, she's just here for the name. She doesn't have to work like the rest of us. Ivanka heard every word, but instead of reacting, she doubled her efforts. She spent hours at construction sites, walking through the dust and debris, observing every detail. She learned how to read blueprints, negotiate contracts, and analyze investments. Then one day, when a major real estate project hit an unexpected roadblock, Ivanka was the first to propose a viable solution. At the board meeting, she presented her case. When she finished, Donald Trump leaned back, studying her. Go with Ivanka's plan. The room fell silent. Ivanka exhaled, steadying herself. This was it, the moment she had proven she belonged. That night, she sat on the rooftop of Trump Tower, staring at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. Her mother. "I heard about today. You did well." Ivanka smiled. "I didn't need Dad's approval, but it felt good to earn it." Ivana's voice was warm. "You're not just his daughter anymore. You're Ivanka Trump." And for the first time, Ivanka truly believed it. Kaneti. New York glittered below her, but Ivanka's mind was elsewhere. She had worked tirelessly at the Trump Organization, but something inside her still felt unfulfilled. She had always loved fashion, but not as a model. She wanted to create something lasting, something of her own. One morning, she stepped into her father's office. "Dad, I want to start my own brand." Donald Trump raised an eyebrow. "A business outside of real estate?" "Yes, and I want to do it on my own." He studied her for a long moment before finally nodding. "Then you'd better make it successful." Starting a brand from scratch was far from easy. Ivanka had to learn everything: supply chains, manufacturing, marketing. She personally met with designers, tested materials, and negotiated deals. One friend in the fashion industry smirked when she heard Ivanka's plan. "Seriously? There are already so many brands out there." Ivanka only smiled. "Then I'll make mine different." Launch day arrived. The Ivanka Trump collection, her own line of fashion and accessories, was finally unveiled. As she stood backstage before stepping out, her heart pounded. This wasn't a modeling job. She wasn't presenting someone else's designs. This was her brand. Taking a deep breath, she walked onto the stage. The audience was filled with industry professionals, critics, and customers. She scanned the front row, finding her mother. Ivana gave her a slight nod, her expression proud. At that moment, Ivanka knew this wasn't just about selling fashion. This was about proving she could build something entirely her own. That night after the event, she received a message from her mother. "You've created something that belongs to you. I always knew you would." Ivanka looked at the screen, then out at the city beyond. She had found her path. Ivanka's heels clicked against the marble floors of the Trump Organization's headquarters. She adjusted the files in her hands, keeping her pace steady. She was no longer a trainee, no longer just Donald Trump's daughter. She had earned her place here. Inside the boardroom, tension hung heavy in the air. A major real estate project had hit a roadblock, and executives were deep in heated debate. Ivanka stood quietly listening. When the discussion turned into a stalemate, she finally spoke. "We're focusing too much on fixing a failing strategy rather than asking if this was the right direction from the beginning." Heads turned. Some looked skeptical, others curious. "What do you mean?" one of the senior executives asked. Ivanka took a deep breath and laid out her case. She had analyzed the numbers, studied the patterns, and seen the flaws others had overlooked. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, nodding. "Go with Ivanka's plan." A murmur spread through the room. Some were surprised. Others nodded in approval. For Ivanka, it wasn't about proving something to her father anymore. She had proven it to herself. That evening, she stayed late at the office, staring out at the city lights from her desk. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "I heard about today. You've earned this moment." Ivanka smiled, typing back. "And I still feel like it's only the beginning." Ivana's reply came quickly. "Then keep going." And she would. New York was dazzling as ever, but Ivanka's mind was set on something new. She had built a career in real estate, but now she wanted to build something entirely her own. She had always loved fashion, not just as a model, but as a creator. One morning, she walked into her father's office. "Dad, I want to start my own brand." Donald Trump raised an eyebrow. "A business outside of real estate?" "Yes, and I want to do it on my own." He studied her for a long moment before finally nodding. "Then make it count." Starting a brand wasn't easy. She had to learn everything: supply chains, production, pricing. She met with designers, tested fabrics, and negotiated contracts. One evening, at a dinner with industry professionals, someone scoffed at her plans. "Another socialite launching a fashion brand." Ivanka smiled calmly. Number A, businesswoman launching a brand for working women. She wasn't just designing clothes, she was creating fashion that balanced elegance with practicality, clothing that empowered women like her. Launch day arrived. The Ivanka Trump collection was officially revealed. Backstage, her hands felt clammy, but she steadied herself. This wasn't just another runway show. This was her legacy. As she stepped onto the stage, she spotted her mother in the front row. Ivana's gaze was steady, proud. At that moment, Ivanka knew this was the path she was meant to take. That night, a message from Ivana appeared on her phone. "You've created something that belongs to you. I always knew you would." Ivanka looked out at the city skyline, her heart full. She had found her way. Ivanka stared at the blank pages before her. The glow from her desk lamp illuminated her notes. Thoughts scattered across the paper. She had succeeded in real estate. She had built her own brand. But she still felt like there was more she could do. Her phone buzzed. Her mother's message. "You've learned so much, but how many people have you shared it with?" Ivanka reread the words. How many? She had worked hard, but had she helped others do the same? She tapped her pen against the table, then began to write. The process of writing was more difficult than she imagined. She wanted to create something meaningful, something that could help women navigate their careers, balance work and family, and define success on their own terms. Page by page, she poured her experiences onto paper. One evening, she handed her mother the first draft. "Read this." Ivana flipped through the pages, her sharp eyes scanning the words. After a long moment, she looked up. "This is your voice." Ivanka exhaled, relieved. The book, Women Who Work, Rewriting the Rules for Success, was released soon after. It wasn't just about business. It was about empowerment. Letters and messages poured in from women all over the world. One evening, she received an email from a woman she had never met. "Because of your book, I found the courage to leave a job that didn't value me and start my own company." "Thank you." Ivanka closed her laptop, staring at the city beyond her window. She had set out to find her own path. Now she was helping others do the same. The campaign trail was unlike anything Ivanka had ever experienced. Politics was not her world. She had built her career in business, in fashion, in leadership. But now she found herself at the center of a national movement. One evening during a private family meeting, Donald Trump looked at her across the table. "Ivanka, do you want to help me?" She hesitated, not because she didn't want to support her father, but because she needed to be sure, was this truly where she belonged? Finally, she met his gaze. "I'm not doing this for you, Dad. I'm doing it because I believe I can make a difference." When the first months of the campaign were relentless, the media picked apart her every word, her every appearance. Critics dismissed her as merely Trump's daughter, an extension of her father. During a live interview, a reporter leaned forward, a smirk on his lips. "Do you really think you'd be here if your last name weren't Trump?" Ivanka didn't flinch. She met his gaze, calm and steady. "If I weren't capable, no one would be listening to me, regardless of my last name." The response was simple, but it was enough. When Donald Trump won the election, Ivanka found herself standing in the White House, stepping into a role she had never anticipated. One evening, she entered the Oval Office. Her father was seated at his desk, looking over a document. She hesitated at the doorway. "Are you sure I belong here?" Donald Trump glanced up, setting down his pen. "If you weren't, you wouldn't be asking that question." She nodded, straightening her shoulders. Then she stepped forward. Mornings at the White House started early. Ivanka's schedule was packed with policy meetings, strategy sessions, and public engagements. But this was unlike any boardroom she had sat in before. One afternoon, she attended a high-level meeting on labor policies. The room was filled with senior politicians and business leaders. As she spoke about the importance of paid family leave, a senator interrupted. "You really think we can afford that?" Ivanka didn't back down. "I think we can't afford not to. If we want to strengthen our economy, we need to support working families." Some nodded in agreement, others remained skeptical. But she had learned long ago. Change didn't come from waiting for approval. Outside the political sphere, she faced another challenge, balancing her career with her family. One evening, she arrived home late. Jared was reading to the children in the living room. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching, a pang of guilt rising in her chest. As he closed the book, Arabella looked up. "Mommy, why do you have to work so much?" Ivanka knelt beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Because I want to help make things better for other families, just like ours." Arabella thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but promise you'll still be here to tuck me in?" Ivanka smiled, pulling her into a hug. "I promise." Criticism never stopped. The media dubbed her the shadow queen of the White House, claiming she had too much influence without ever being elected. At a dinner with friends, one of them hesitated before speaking. "Ivanka, do you ever feel overwhelmed? Like maybe you're in too deep?" Ivanka swirled her wine glass, considering the question. "I knew from the beginning that I would be criticized, no matter what I did. But if I let that stop me, I wouldn't be here." Her friend nodded. "And do you think you're making a difference?" Ivanka set down her glass, her voice unwavering. "I know I am." The White House years passed in a blur. When her father's presidency ended, Ivanka had a choice to make. One evening, she sat across from Jared at the dinner table. "I don't know if I want to stay in politics," she admitted. Jared nodded. "So what do you want?" She sighed, stirring her tea. "I want to be present for my family, but I also want to keep helping people, just in my own way." Jared smiled. "Then do that." Ivanka stepped away from the political spotlight, but she didn't disappear. Instead, she redirected her focus, advocating for women's economic empowerment, education, and entrepreneurship. One day, she received a letter from a young woman who had attended one of her programs. "Because of the initiatives you supported, I was able to start my own business. I never thought I could do it, but you showed me that women can succeed on their own terms." "Thank you," Ivanka folded the letter, staring at the words for a long time. She had spent her life proving she was more than a last name. Now she was helping others do the same. One evening, she sat in her daughter's room, reading a bedtime story. As she turned the last page, Arabella looked up. "Mom, can I be anything I want?" Ivanka smiled, brushing her fingers through her daughter's hair. "Of course, sweetheart, as long as you believe in yourself and work hard." Arabella thought for a moment. "Like you did?" Ivanka felt something tighten in her chest. She nodded. "Yes, just like I did." As she kissed her daughter goodnight, she thought back to the nights her own mother had whispered prayers over her. "Find your own path, my love." And she had, not because of the name she was born with, not because of anyone else, but because she had chosen it for herself. The soft glow of candlelight flickered in the quiet room. Ivanka stood still, her gaze locked on the framed photo of her mother. Ivanka Trump looked as elegant and poised as ever, captured in a moment of timeless grace. But this time, there was no warm smile, no reassuring words. She clenched her hands into fists, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She knew her mother wouldn't want her to be weak in this moment. A familiar voice broke the silence beside her. "Mom would be so proud of you." She turned to see her father standing next to her, his expression unusually solemn. "You've done exactly what she wanted," he continued. "You found your own path." Ivanka swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. That night, long after the guests had left, Ivanka sat alone in her mother's study. The room smelled faintly of her favorite perfume, the bookshelves filled with carefully curated novels and business guides. She let her fingers glide over the wooden desk until they stopped at a neatly placed envelope. It was a letter written in her mother's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Ivanka, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. But do not grieve for me, my love, because I have seen you grow, I have seen you fight, and I have seen you rise. I have no greater wish than to know that you are strong, that you are unshaken, and that you are walking your own journey. Continue forward, not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourself. With love, Mom." Ivanka felt the tears sting her eyes. She pressed the letter against her chest and whispered, "I promise, Mom, I'll keep going." The transition out of the White House brought an unexpected peace. For the first time in years, Ivanka had time. Time to sit with her children, time to enjoy the quiet mornings, time to just breathe. One crisp autumn morning, she sat on the patio, sipping coffee as the sun rose. Arabella ran up to her, tugging on her sleeve. "Mom, are you going back to your big important job?" Ivanka smiled and pulled her daughter onto her lap. "What do you think my big important job is?" Arabella thought for a moment, her little brows furrowing. "Helping people?" Ivanka kissed the top of her head. "That's right, and I can do that in many ways, even without a title." Ivanka chose a new direction, not in politics, not entirely in business, but in impact. She launched new initiatives to support female entrepreneurs, created scholarships for young women, and used her platform to advocate for change. At a global summit on women's leadership, she stood on stage, looking out at the sea of young, determined faces before her. "When I was a little girl, my mother told me that a woman could have everything if she was willing to work for it. Today I stand before you not as someone who inherited success, but as someone who built her own." She paused, scanning the room. "You don't need to be someone's daughter to be great. You don't need a famous last name. All you need is the courage to write your own story." Applause erupted. But more than the applause, what mattered to Ivanka was the looks of inspiration in their eyes. She was no longer just living her story. She was helping others write theirs. A warm breeze rustled through the trees as Ivanka sat on the balcony, watching the golden hues of the sunset. The world around her was quieter now. No flashing cameras, no political debates, no corporate meetings. Jared walked out, sitting beside her. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. Ivanka took a deep breath, considering his question. "I miss making an impact, but I've learned that you don't need a title or a stage to do that." Jared nodded. "So, what's next?" She turned to him, a soft smile playing on her lips. "More of what matters." One day a request came in. A television show wanted to interview her, to discuss her legacy. During the taping, the interviewer leaned forward. "If you could go back and change anything, would you?" Ivanka shook her head. "Number every challenge, every setback, every moment, good or bad, shaped who I am today." The interviewer nodded. "And what's the greatest lesson you've learned?" Ivanka smiled. "That success isn't about money or titles. It's about the lives you touch and the difference you make." She spent her time traveling, meeting women who were building their own businesses, mentoring young leaders, and creating opportunities for others. At one event, she received a letter from a woman who had attended one of her leadership workshops. "Because of what I learned from you, I found the strength to believe in myself. I started my own company. I created jobs. I changed my future. Thank you." Ivanka folded the letter and exhaled. She had spent years proving she was more than a name. Now she was helping others prove it to themselves. One evening, she tucked Arabella into bed, brushing her daughter's hair away from her face. "Mom, can I be anything I want?" Ivanka smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. As long as you believe in yourself and work hard." Arabella's eyes sparkled. "Like you did." Ivanka felt her heart swell. "Yes, just like I did." She turned off the light, stepping out into the hallway. For a moment she stood still, remembering the nights her own mother had whispered words of encouragement to her. "Find your own path, my love." She had, not because of her father, not because of her name, but because she had chosen it for herself.